Hey everybody, this is Jules again, showing another chess analysis video. I'm Funk Daddy. As you can see, I'm 12-12, so my rank is actually lower than it was for my last video. I had a couple bad runs this weekend, but my opponent today is Spar67. This isn't actually the most interesting game, but I just want to show two things. One is I've played 4 games against this guy, 4 in a row. So I kind of got an idea of his play style, and because I knew his play style, it allowed me to make a decision quite effectively, and also the notion of like what an end game will look like, and knowing that you have the advantage. So let's go through this. So he does standard, e4 opening. He does the King's Gambit, but I don't really know anything about the King's Gambit personally. So whenever somebody does an opening that I don't really understand or haven't really looked into, I don't really like take any bait. I just kind of like continue developing my pieces because maybe he has some like crazy line where me taking this pawn over here could be really advantageous for him. So instead of that, actually the engine tells me to do it, but because it is kind of a free pawn. I could take it and he can't retake it back immediately. But yeah, until then, I'll look into the King's Gambit. So I just develop my pawns. He develops. I'm also developing. The engine still tells me to take it. I guess it's a little bit too late now. Uh, okay, so here I'm just putting pressure on the queen so that if he moves his knight either here or here to e5 or d4, then I can kill his queen. And then he does the move of connecting all of his pawns into one line, which is very effective. It doesn't seem like the worst move, but the engine says it's definitely a mistake. I guess because if you disrupt the line, like let's say I were to move this pawn up here, he would take, I could take freely, and then this pawn would be kind of isolated all by itself, and I could probably take later with the bishop. So this is probably why it's a mistake. So I'm being a little bit aggressive here. Honestly, this is a move that's a little outside of my usual comfort. Um, I was just trying to, put pressure on his knight for him to move, but honestly, it was a little bit out of my style. He defends with the bishop, which is good. So when he moves up his bishop here, I'm seeing that, okay, so he's definitely developed a lot on just this side of the board and none on the right side of the board. So I'm expecting a castle on this side, and I'm thinking, well, if I could disturb all of your minor pieces in the process, then, well, why not? Let's do it. So I trade. He takes. I move up to. I move up my queen in preparation for a castle. He pushes back my pawn, which I'm not even that upset to see because again I just want to disturb this side of the board as much as possible. I take. He takes. And I castle. So this is the board state now. I'm much preferring black's position over white's, even though they have the huge chain link of pawns. As you can see, it's easily disturbed. Even the engine is telling me, it's like, yep, you could have moved up your pawn over here to break this up quite easily. Um, he develops his knight. I'm just pushing back on his pawn chain. I have nothing to worry here because everything is super defended. And he castles, which apparently is the best move. However, like if you look at his castle side, it's pretty ugly. He's got his queen in front of a rook, which isn't the best position. You kind of want it the other way around, um, because if I were to put a rook here, then it would put pressure here. Yeah, and if I were to start advancing my pawns, it could be pretty bad for him. So I'm just setting up my stuff. He's attacking. So he's kind of pinning my rook against my knight, which I don't like. My response to that is actually just getting my bishop out of the way so I can get my rook into play. The idea is to move the rook here. Although pushing back the bishop probably would have been a much better idea. It would have forced the trade, which is fine with me. He moves his knight here, and this is kind of where I took a pretty long pause, because as you can see, if he were to take my knight and put me in check, I can't take with the queen because the bishop would just grab my queen. So I'm in a pretty bad position. with this move here. In terms of, I don't have a lot of options. And if I were to move my knight to capture his, well, he would just take my bishop. Sorry, he would take my rook, and I would be at a disadvantage after that exchange. So I took about 30 seconds because, I've been moving pretty fast. I've only spent a minute and 15 seconds on the clock. And so what I did was, like, I took a look at his board. I was like, well, this is pretty underdeveloped, and I know that I know he's a weaker player. I've played 4 games with him. I've beat him 3 out of 4. Um, so I believe my endgame is better than his, and certainly my position for the endgame, given that my king is over here next to my larger group of pawns compared to his king next to just 2. I believe my endgame can beat his. So the process of doing this is very important. Number 1, you put pressure on the queen. Although the engine says to take. The engine wants me to lose the rook apparently, but so he moves his queen over here. So this puts me into another weird position. It's like, okay, black. Well, what's the order of exchanging all these pieces so you don't completely mess everything up? I could take with the queen immediately. He could check me, and then I would have to move my king, and then he could take my queen. So I would immediately be down a knight in this variant. So I need to be sure to either put him in check or take this piece immediately. So he captures. Yeah, so this is a mistake. Because if he were to put me in check right now, I would have to move. His knight would be defended, and then he could take my queen right after. So I kind of blundered over there. Yeah, he ends up taking my queen, which, as I just said, he could have got a free piece. So he didn't do that, so I immediately take the knight. He trades. I'm asking for a trade. He accepts, and then he moves up his pawn. So yeah, as I mentioned before, like, I'm much preferring this position. This is even though I overlooked the blunder, this was the position I was hoping to see at the end. Here we have 2 weak pawns. They're one in front of each other, so they can't defend themselves. And eventually, like, this is not the best setup. 2 pawns on the same file with only 1 defender. I'll move up my king to get it into the action as soon as possible. So he's moving up his pawns pretty quickly. With no king defender, his bishop isn't even in play. And here I'll just start setting up some trades. By setting up some trades, I can, like, also in the process move my king forward. So he does this terrible move because it gives me a free pawn right here, which he fails to see. I take, he takes, I take. So that's a 2-for-1 immediately. And as you can see, I also have this move coming up next, unless he moves this piece over here. He moves his bishop, trying to attack this pawn. I don't really think there's any way he's going to get it. So I just move it forward. Like, my goal is to get a queen with any of these pawns, bring my king up. And the best position for this, actually, is to have your king in front of the pawns as well, just to, like, fend off any kings. Like, if a king were to block one of these squares, we don't want that. We don't want a king just sitting idly while, stuff happens underneath it. So he decides to move forward. I put pressure, unlocking this. He moves up. I take. He does a mistake with his king. He doesn't get it into the center of the board where the action is happening. So I see this as a free queen. I'm just going to move my pawn up forward. I have it defended with the bishop. There really isn't much he can do at this point. The game is essentially over. He has already blundered the entire game. So he does the right move with defending with his bishop, but it's already too late. He brings up his king. I check him with the queen and force the exchange. He can chase around my bishop, but he'll never get it for the rest of the game. And I can put pressure this way with my king, this way with my bishop. So he'll move up. I take. He moves up. I can defend the bishop easily or just move it. He moves up his pawn. I'll get my bishop out of the way, just defend here, cut him off over here. And the reason for that is because I'm going to start engaging my king on this side. As you can see, like the weak pawns really come into effect here. Having them one behind the other is terrible for endgame momentum. He can't even advance unless I decide to. But of course, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to attack with my king, and he can't really do anything. If he moves here, I take. If he moves here, I take. So he moves his king back, and the rest is just simply game over for him. So yeah, so I ended up beating him. I think 4 games out of 5. And this is where he decided to quit. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Again, the purpose of this video was just to show, like, I saw the end game coming through like a multitude of exchanges with some weird openings. Okay, thanks for watching.